While I was in Alaska, my daughter sold my Arizona home, not rented it, not borrowed against it, not made a mistake with a signature and apologized when I came back. Sold it. I found out at 4:16 on a Wednesday afternoon, standing in my own driveway with a broken key in my hand, 2 suitcases beside my feet, and the Phoenix sun burning the back of my neck like a warning. 3 weeks earlier, I had been on a boat in Prince William Sound, breathing cold air, watching mountains rise out of the water like the backs of sleeping giants. I had gone there because after my wife, Ellen, passed away, my son David told me I needed to remember there was still a world outside grief. So I booked the trip, packed my fishing jacket, locked my house, and asked my daughter Jennifer to collect the mail. That was all. Collect the mail, water the basil, check the porch lights. Instead, she changed my locks, emptied my garage, signed my name, and handed the house Ellen, and I had built our last years around to strangers. When the key snapped inside the lock, I laughed once. A small, stupid laugh. The kind a man makes before his mind is ready to understand danger. I pressed the garage remote. The little light blinked red. I pressed it again. Again. Red. Then the front door opened. A man I had never seen stood there wearing a faded baseball t-shirt and holding a coffee mug. Behind him, my entryway looked almost right and completely wrong. The cream walls Ellen had chosen were painted green. The small table where she used to leave church bulletins was gone. A new rug covered the tile. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh paint. "Can I help you?" the man asked. I stared past him. "This is my house." His face tightened. "Excuse me, my name is Robert Mitchell." A woman appeared behind him with a phone already in her hand. She looked nervous, but not guilty. That was the first thing I noticed. Guilt has a temperature. These people were confused and afraid, but they were not hiding anything. The man lowered his mug. "Sir, my wife and I bought this house 3 weeks ago." For a second, the driveway moved under me. I put one hand on the doorframe to steady myself. 3 weeks ago, I had been standing under a sky full of northern lights. 3 weeks ago, I had watched whales cut through gray water. 3 weeks ago, I had thought about calling Jennifer just to tell her I was peaceful for the first time in years. "No," I said. "No, that's impossible." The woman whispered, "Sam, call someone." I pulled out my phone and called Jennifer. She answered on the 4th ring. "Dad." Her voice was careful. "Too careful. There are people in my house." A pause. That pause told me more than any confession could. "Dad," she said, "please don't start yelling." "Why are there people in my house?" She sighed. I knew that sigh. She had used it as a teenager when I told her no. She used it at 22 when I asked why she had dropped another class. She used it after Ellen's funeral when I asked her to stay one more night, and she told me Michael needed her at home. It was the sigh of a daughter who had already decided her father was a problem to manage. "I sold it," she said. I did not understand the sentence. Not at first. Words can hit the ear before they hit the heart. "You did what?" "I sold the house." Michael owed people money. Serious money. Somewhere behind her, I heard my son-in-law laugh. Michael Carter had a laugh like cheap glass breaking. Too loud. Too sharp. Always at the wrong time. "You cannot sell my house," I said. "Jennifer, listen to me. You cannot sell what you do not own." "We had the documents from your surgery," she said. "My medical power of attorney. You signed it. For my gallbladder surgery. Years ago. It was temporary. Dad, it's done. The buyers have papers. The deed recorded. You should go to the Fairmont. I booked you a room. We'll talk when you calm down." When I calmed down. Then Michael's voice came closer to the phone. "You're homeless now, old man. Be grateful she got you a hotel." Jennifer did not correct him. She hung up. For a moment I stood very still. The new owner, Sam, Looked like he wanted to apologize for a crime he had not committed. His wife, Gloria, whispered into her phone. My luggage sat behind me on the driveway like evidence that I had returned too late to my own life. The police came, 2 young officers, polite, professional, helpless. Sam showed them the purchase documents. The deed, the title paperwork, my supposed signature. It was almost good. Almost. The R was wrong. The slant was wrong. The pressure was wrong. I had spent 40 years as a corporate lawyer before retirement, and if there was one thing I understood, it was paper. Real paper. False paper. Paper that told the truth by accident. That signature is forged, I told the officers. One of them looked sorry before she even spoke. Mr. Mitchell, this is going to be a civil matter. We can document your statement, but the current owners have legal paperwork. Legal paperwork. Not truth. Paperwork. They gave me a ride to the hotel because I could not stay on the property. The property. That was what they called my home, while I sat in the back of a police car like an elderly trespasser. On the way out of the neighborhood, I looked back through the rear window. Ellen's wind chime was gone from the porch. The little desert rosebush she had planted after her last round of treatment was still there, but someone had trimmed it too hard. Even from the car, I could see the wounded shape of it. That was the first time I felt my anger become useful. At the Fairmont, the clerk smiled and said, "Your daughter mentioned you might be tired from traveled." That was the word Jennifer chose. Not betrayed. Not displaced. Not robbed. Tired. I took the key card, rode the elevator, entered a room overlooking a golf course, and gave myself 60 seconds. 60 seconds to sit on the bed, 60 seconds to breathe, 60 seconds to miss Ellen so badly it felt like something inside my chest had been scraped hollow. Then I opened my laptop. Cloud storage is a blessing if you have the mind of a suspicious old lawyer. Every trust document Ellen and I ever signed was scanned. Every deed, every amendment, every letter from our estate attorney. I had kept records so obsessively that Jennifer used to tease me for it. That night, those records became weapons. The Arizona house was not in my name alone. It belonged to the Mitchell family trust. Jennifer knew that. David knew that. Any sale required approval from all trustees. Jennifer, David. The medical power of attorney she had mentioned had expired years earlier and gave no authority over property. I opened David's number. Dade. Jennifer just called me. She said you were confused and acting unstable. Your sister sold the house. Silence. Then he said, "No. She forged my name. And unless you signed something without telling me, too, I never signed anything." I know. His voice changed. What do you need? That question nearly broke me. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was simple. My daughter had spent all day explaining why she had the right to destroy me. My son asked how to help. I need a notarized statement. Tonight, if possible. I'm leaving now. After we hung up, I sat in the dark hotel room and looked at the folder on my screen. Jennifer thought she had outgrown me. Michael thought age made me soft. They had forgotten that before I was a widower, before I was a grandfather, before I was the quiet man trimming roses in the Arizona heat, I had spent my life reading lies until they confessed. The next morning, I drove a rental car to Jennifer's house in Paradise Valley. Of course, she lived in Paradise Valley. Of course, the driveway held 2 luxury cars, bought with money Michael did not have. Of course, the fountain ran in front of the house like a little performance of success. Their place was twice the size of mine, and half as warm. Michael answered the door in a robe. "Robert," he said. "Not Dad, not Mr. Mitchell. Robert." I walked past him. Jennifer sat at the kitchen island with a laptop open. She wore makeup at 10 in the morning, and the same careful expression she used when lying became a business meeting. "Dad," she began, "before you get upset." 380,000, I said. Michael stopped moving. Jennifer's mouth opened. That is what he owed, I asked. At least the part you knew about. How did you? She began. People answer questions. When a retired attorney says fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, and financial conspiracy in the same sentence. Michael slammed his mug on the counter. Coffee spilled across the marble. You don't know who you're dealing with, old man. I turned to him. No, Michael. You don't. Jennifer tried to soften her voice. Dad, you don't need that house. You're alone. We were going to make sure you had somewhere safe. Safe, I said. You took the house your mother died in and gave it away to pay his gambling debts. Her face flinched at Ellen's name. Not enough. Then Michael smiled. Look, you got a nice hotel. Most old men would be grateful. That was when I knew I would not argue. Argument would only feed them. I stood up. You committed fraud. You forged signatures. You involved a title company, a notary, a real estate agent, and possibly a lender. Every person you touched is now part of the story, and I am going to let the documents tell it. Jennifer stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. You would take your own daughter to court. I would take anyone to court for stealing my home. You're supposed to love me unconditionally. I do, I said. That is why I'm giving you the chance to learn the difference between love and permission. I walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back and said the name that made Michael's smile vanish. James Harrison remembers you. Michael's eyes went flat. James Harrison had been a federal prosecutor before opening a private practice. He had a reputation for taking messy cases and making judges understand them in clean sentences. Years earlier, he had crossed paths with Michael during a failed development deal. Michael did not know I knew that. Outside, I texted James, "Gather the team." Then I sat in the rental car and watched Jennifer's curtains move. The war began at 9:30 the next morning. James's conference room became a command center. A whiteboard listed dates, names, transfers, phone calls, signatures, notary seals, and bank wires. David arrived from Seattle with his statement. A forensic document examiner named Dr. Laura Chen arrived with a case full of equipment and a calm face that frightened me more than anger would have. She placed my real signatures beside the signature on the sale documents. This was copied, she said within minutes, not written naturally. The stop and start pressure. A real signature has motion. A forged one has fear. Then she examined David's supposed signature. David gave a short, humorless laugh. At least she didn't practice on me. Nobody smiled. By noon, we had the notary. By 2, we had the real estate agent, Sylvia Vance, Jennifer's college roommate. By 4, we had bank transfers from the sale proceeds into accounts linked to Michael's development company, then out again in strange amounts designed to look ordinary and failing badly. James leaned back in his chair. This is not a family misunderstanding. No, I said. It never was. Emergency injunction today. Asset freeze. Property transfer restrictions. Criminal referral. Do it. That evening, a judge signed the first order. Jennifer and Michael woke up the next morning inside a life that looked rich, but could no longer move. Credit cards declined. Accounts frozen. Vehicles flagged. A Paradise Valley mansion with no oxygen. Jennifer called me at 12:31. She was whispering, "What have you done? You stole my house. My cards don't work." Michael is screaming. "The bank says everything is restricted." That sounds inconvenient. Dade, you don't understand. He owes dangerous people. Then he should not have used my house as a bandage. As my husband. And I am your father. She started crying then, but it was the wrong kind of crying. There was no sorrow in it, only panic. I hung up. That night, Michael came to my hotel. Not at dinner. Not at 8. At 3 in the morning, when decent people are asleep and desperate, People think darkness gives them power. He pounded on the door hard enough to shake the frame. I opened my phone's recording app before I opened the door chain. He smelled of whiskey and sweat. His hair stuck up in pieces. The robe and luxury watch were gone. He wore yesterday's shirt and the face of a man who had discovered consequences. "You need to drop this," he said. "Go home, Michael. You know what happens to old men in hotels. They fall. They have heart attacks. They disappear. Is that a threat?" It's advice. The old part of me wanted to hit him. The lawyer in me stayed still. "Say it again," I said. He stared at me. I let him see the phone in my hand. His face changed. He kicked over a hallway lamp and ran before security arrived, but hotel cameras had him. My recording had him. His threat became another brick in the wall he had helped build. A private investigator. I used to know, Vincent Morales, met me the next afternoon near the McDowell Mountains. He handed me a folder thick enough to have weight in more than paper. "Your son-in-law is in deeper than Jennifer admitted," he said. "How deep?" "Close to $500,000. Gambling. Private lenders. Some men who prefer not to file lawsuits because they solve problems differently." The photographs showed Michael in parking lots, warehouses, and back rooms with people who did not look like investors. Then, Vincent gave me the part that changed everything. Michael forged Jennifer's name too. I looked up. "She signed some loans," he said. "But not all. Witnesses put her somewhere else, when a few documents were supposedly signed. He used her the same way she used you. The forger had been forged. Instead, I felt sick. Jennifer was guilty. I knew that. She had planned. She had signed. She had mocked me while I stood outside my own door. But she was still the little girl who once fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. She was still the teenager Ellen worried over. She was still my daughter, even if she had become someone I could not protect from herself. Justice is clean on paper. In the heart, it is never clean. A few days later, Sam and Gloria, the couple who had bought my house, called me. They had saved for 20 years. Sylvia, the real estate agent, had rushed them, telling them other buyers were waiting. They had no idea the house carried forged consent from trustees. "We'll testify," Gloria said. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "Whatever you need." That was when the case became bigger than my house. Christine Park, their attorney, found 2 earlier deals Sylvia had handled with elderly sellers, fast closings, and family representatives with suspicious paperwork. Maybe Jennifer had only been bold once. Maybe Sylvia had been bold before. Either way, the thread was pulling loose. At mediation, Michael destroyed their defense in 12 seconds. Their lawyer tried to claim Jennifer was a frightened wife manipulated by her husband. Michael, restless and sweating, snapped. "Manipulated? She planned the whole thing." The room froze. His lawyer grabbed his sleeve. "Too late. She showed me the trust papers," he shouted. "She said the Alaska trip gave us 3 weeks. She said by the time he came back, the deed would be recorded and the old man wouldn't know how to fight it." Jennifer stared forward. Then, in a voice colder than I had ever heard from her, she said, "You always talk too much." The mediator stopped writing. James looked at me. We did not need to speak. The next hearing drew cameras. The story was too simple for the news to ignore. Daughter sells father's home while he is on vacation. Retired widower returns to strangers in his doorway. Frozen accounts. Hidden debts. Jennifer arrived with a new attorney in a black suit and a smile sharp enough to cut paper. In the courtroom, James presented the facts without drama. That was his gift. He did not need to shout because the documents were louder. Trust records. Deed restrictions. The expired medical power of attorney. David's sworn statement. Dr. Chen's analysis. Bank transfers. Michael's hotel threat. Jennifer's messages. The judge, Walter Stone, listened with reading glasses low on his nose and no patience in his face. At the end of the first session, he looked at Jennifer. "Your passport," her attorney objected. "Overruled," the judge said. Jennifer's hand shook when she surrendered it. During recess, she followed me into a quiet hallway near the restrooms. For the first time in weeks, she looked less polished, less certain. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were wild. "I can make this stop," she whispered. "You can tell the truth. I have 200,000 in cash. Untraceable. Take it. Say you were confused. Say grief affected your memory." My phone was already recording from my shirt pocket. "You stole my home, and now you want to buy my silence with stolen money. I am your daughter. You keep saying that like it is a receipt." Her face twisted. "You were supposed to fade quietly after Mom died." There it was, not fear, not desperation, truth. I stepped back from her. "Your mother fought to stay alive because she loved this family. Do not use her death to justify your greed." She grabbed my sleeve. "Michael has people. They know where you are. So do the police." When I played the recording for the prosecutor, his eyebrows lifted. "Bribery. Witness tampering." Threatened Ames asked, "Are you all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm accurate." 4 days later, Jennifer tried to humiliate me in front of her neighbors. She emailed me that some of my belongings were in her garage and would be donated if I did not come that day. The message was too neat, too staged. So I brought an off-duty officer named Tom Rodriguez and kept him close enough to witness, far enough not to be obvious. When I arrived, Jennifer opened the garage with a bright voice. "Oh good," she called out. "My father is here for his things." Neighbors were outside as if summoned. Mrs. Henderson watering roses. Mr. Patel with his old beagle. 2 teenagers pretending to wash a car. Michael stood barefoot with a beer at 10 in the morning. My tools lay scattered on the concrete, some broken. My father's hammer, the one he carried home from military service and used for every repair of my childhood, had fresh dents in the handle. A box of Ellen's photo albums sat open near the driveway. Jennifer smiled for the audience. "Look, everyone." The charity case came to collect his junk. Michael kicked my toolbox. Wrenches slid across the garage floor. I photographed everything. Then he stepped on one of the albums. Photos spilled across the driveway. Jennifer at 5 with birthday cake on her cheeks. Ellen laughing in a yellow dress. David holding a fishing pole. A Thanksgiving table before illness, debt, and greed had eaten holes through us. Mrs. Henderson stopped watering. "This is shameful," she said. Jennifer turned on her. "Mind your business." But the neighbors had phones out now. Jennifer wanted witnesses. She got them. As I loaded my father's damaged hammer into the rental car, Jennifer texted me. "Why are you smiling?" Because she still did not understand. Every insult was evidence. Every performance was proof. Every cruelty showed the judge exactly who she became when she thought nobody could stop her. Then James called. "Robert, we found something in the old trust file." I pulled to the curb. "What?" "The house is only one piece. Ellen's original trust schedule included the larger estate. Properties, investment accounts, bonds. Jennifer may have tried to steal one asset without realizing the safeguards connect to everything." I closed my eyes. Ellen. Even gone, she had been protecting us. The full trust was worth over $3 million. But Jennifer's share could not be touched until she turned 40, and only if there were no active claims of fraud, coercion, or financial abuse connected to the trust. She had not just stolen my house. She had locked herself out of the inheritance Ellen had spent years protecting for her. The federal agents came in after Vincent traced money from the house, sale through shell companies, and offshore accounts. Michael had been moving funds like a man trying to outrun rain. He did not report income. He structured deposits. He paid debts with money that had passed through fraud. By late May, 14 accounts were frozen. A Sedona property Jennifer had never told me about was flagged. Michael vanished for 4 days and was found trying to cross into Nevada with cash in a duffel bag and 2 phones he claimed were not his. When Jennifer called me after that, she was screaming at him in the background. "You stole from me while I stole for you." Then the line went dead. At the June hearing, the truth finally stood in daylight. Jennifer arrived in a borrowed suit. Michael was in custody. The courtroom was full. Sam and Gloria sat behind me. David sat on my left. James stood at the table with the calm posture of a man carrying a loaded cannon made of paperwork. He asked to present the original Mitchell family trust. The projector lit up. There it was. Ellen's signature, my signature, the safeguards, the properties, the dates, the condition that any beneficiary involved in fraud against the trust would have distributions suspended pending review. Jennifer leaned forward like she was seeing a ghost. The judge looked over the document, then at her. "Ms. Carter, you attempted to steal one protected asset from an estate worth millions." "I didn't know," she whispered. That sentence told the whole room who she was. Not "I'm sorry," not "I hurt my father," not "I ruined innocent people." I didn't know. I stood when the judge allowed me to speak. "The trust was not a prize," I said. "It was protection. Your mother and I built it because we saw what greed can do to a family. If you had come to me and said Michael was in trouble, I would have helped you leave him. I would have paid for counsel. I would have protected you. But you did not ask for help. You chose theft because theft felt faster than honesty." Jennifer's lips trembled. "But I'm your daughter." I looked at her for a long moment. "That is why this hurts." The judge remanded her pending further proceedings because of the cash withdrawals, attempted bribery, and flight risk. Michael faced federal charges and eventually took a deal. He received prison time, supervised release, and the kind of financial scrutiny that follows a man like a shadow. Jennifer avoided prison, but not punishment. Restitution. Probation. Community service, mandatory therapy, her financial license gone. Her Paradise Valley house sold at auction. The cars, furniture, and bright polished life she had used to prove she was successful were liquidated piece by piece. Justice did not feel like victory. It felt like standing in an empty room after a fire, grateful the flames were out and heartbroken by what burned. In August, I returned to my house. Sam and Gloria were made whole through title insurance and damages. They chose another retirement home not far away. Before they left, they repainted the entryway cream. They did not know it was Ellen's color until I told them. Gloria cried when she heard that. On the kitchen counter, they left a note. "This house is good bones. Thank you for fighting for what was right." Mrs. Henderson brought a casserole. Mr. Patel brought his beagle. David flew in from Seattle, and together we cleaned the garage. My father's hammer still had the dents Michael left in it. I did not repair them. Some objects deserve to remember. A week later, a letter came from Jennifer. No fancy stationery, no lawyer language. Just her handwriting, smaller than I remembered. She wrote that she was working mornings at Target and evenings at a diner in Glendale. She wrote that honest work hurt her pride in a way she probably needed. She wrote that she was not asking for forgiveness, only for the chance to make payments and become someone her mother might recognize again. I read it 3 times. Then I filed it with the legal papers. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Near the end of the month, the doorbell rang at dinner. Jennifer stood on the porch, holding an envelope. No designer purse, no perfect hair, no performance. Her hands were rough from work. "First restitution payment," she said. $200 in worn 20s. "The Thompsons get theirs next month." I took the envelope. She looked at the floor. "I'm not asking you to say it's okay." "Good," I said, "because it is not." She nodded. "I know." At the steps, she stopped. "Mom would be ashamed of what I became." "Yes," I said. She flinched. Then I added, but she might be proud of what you choose next. For the first time, Jennifer cried without trying to use the tears. Then she walked away. That evening, David and I sat at the kitchen table, where Ellen used to drink tea. We reviewed the trust documents again. We added safeguards. Not because I wanted to punish the future, but because some lessons should only have to be paid for once. At sunset, I stepped into the backyard. The Arizona sky burned copper and violet. The desert rosebush near the porch had started to grow again, uneven but alive. My house was not innocent anymore. It had held love, illness, betrayal, evidence, shame, return, and something that might someday become healing. Michael learned that greed can gamble with other people's lives and still lose everything. Jennifer learned that being family does not turn a crime into a favor. And I learned that justice is not revenge if what you are really protecting is the truth. People ask me whether I got my home back. I tell them yes. But that is not the whole answer. I got my name back from forged paper. I got my wife's memory back from their excuses. I got my silence back from people who mistook it for weakness. And when I sleep now, under the roof Ellen and I chose together, I keep my father's scarred hammer on the workbench and the broken key in a small box on my desk. One reminds me what can be repaired. The other reminds me what never should be trusted again. Because family is not proven by blood. Family is proven by what you protect when stealing would be easier. And sometimes, the only way to save what is left of a family is to stop calling betrayal love.